Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Education Town Hall on the ABC15 Facebook page. I'm Danielle Lerner, joined with Carla Navarrete, and we are looking forward to another great town hall experience focused on education, where we can hopefully address some of your questions, some of your concerns regarding what's happening right now in our schools, and just dive a little deeper into some of the issues our school communities are facing. Right up here to my, there we go, to my right on the screen, left in person, is Maricopa County Superintendent Steve Watson. He is joining us today. We are so glad to have him. And then right below him, we have Dr. Ron Melmed. He's a developmental pediatrician with the Melmed Center, and also the co-founder of the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, or SARC. So we have two wonderful guests today, and we really look forward to diving deeper into some of these issues. And so we invite you to please comment, go ahead and put any questions or anything you'd like us to address in the comment section, and Carla and I can see those and go through those, and we will do our best to address those. So just to kick us off, Steve, I'd love to start with you. As the Maricopa County School Superintendent, can you talk a little bit about some of the questions, some of the concerns that you're getting from families right now? I know your office is in constant contact with our parents, with our teachers, and our schools. So what sorts of issues are on your radar right now?
Yeah, we're hearing from everybody, exactly right. We're hearing from parents, we're hearing from teachers, and people just want to know what's next. People are just trying to kind of plan their lives, plan their future, know what to tell their own employers if they're a parent. If they're a student, they're trying to figure out just what school's going to look like for the rest of the semester and the school year. And then the teachers kind of are in the same boat. They just want to know, okay, so what are the expectations going to be moving forward? And so there's just a lot of questions around, where are we going and how are we going to get there? And so it's just that information. And I think there's a general sense of eagerness to kind of move forward, whatever that is, whatever the districts, whatever the decisions are made by our local school districts. There's just an eagerness to move forward with that. And so that's just the general vibe right now.
All right, some great perspective. Thank you.
So I want to bring it over to Dr. Ron Melmed. I had the opportunity to speak with him earlier this week. We're featuring a story on kindergarten, first and second grade, and we've really seen Kyrene starting next week with opening up their schools to that age group. Also, Chandler Unified is opening up to that group. Deer Valley is opening up to that specific population, also the seniors. And so one of the things that Dr. Ron Melmed said to me earlier this week was, now we know what to expect. We know what to do. We're 6 months into this pandemic. And so being safe, obviously, at first, above all. But Dr. Melmed, could you talk to us a little bit about the mental health have had to go through these 6 months and how important it is to get back into that classroom if it is safe to do so?
Wow. I was just thinking when the superintendent was talking about what parents would like to know, what's going to happen and when things are going to change, etc. I just thought of that quote by Yogi Berra, is that predictions are very difficult, especially when talking about the future. So we've had a tough time. I think initially a lot of people and parents were telling their children it's soon going to be over. Come the summer, come June, come July, you'll be going off to summer camp. It'll be fine, and definitely by the time school starts, this will all be behind us. And I think that what we've come to terms with is the fact that we're dealing with a new reality. This is a new situation that's probably not going to change for a long period of time. And through the course of it, certainly there'll be ups and downs, and different things will happen. But I think having the expectation, the overly optimistic expectations that it's all going to be over very soon, I think is possibly even harmful. The good news is that our children are incredibly resilient. They've been flexible. They've changed with the times, and in many ways, I've heard from many parents that the parents have learned from their children how to deal with these kinds of changes. but children are different one from another, just like adults are. And children with difficulties and with disabilities are particularly different one from another. And my area of dealing with children with disabilities is a challenge. The interesting thing is that many of our children have done exceptionally well with staying at home, while others, who we would have expected to have done absolutely fine, are becoming very jittery, very anxious, very stressed. The big thing about mental health that we always think is so important is to keep routines going. And boy, have routines been disrupted. Parents are living at home, kids aren't going to school, night times have changed, screen time allowances have changed. And I always am concerned that with this disruption of routine and with different kind of sleeping habits and eating habits and work habits, that's the time that mental health challenges often rears its head.
Sure. And I know, that goes along with the main concerns that so many parents have is, the safety of their children, the mental health of their children, also the physical safety of their children. There's a comment here from Lark McKay. It's right up toward the beginning of when we first started seeing some of these comments. It says, what have school districts done to improve the air quality and circulation per CDC guidelines? So some questions regarding some mitigation protocols that have been put in place. Steve, you and I had spoken last weekend about how there's this local control aspect where different districts may be doing some different things, but that the overall goal is the same, to try to protect the students and the staff first and foremost. So for folks out there who may have questions about their district's protocols, where is the best place for them to find that information? What sorts of guidance should they be looking to get those answers, since it does vary by district?
Yeah, it does. It varies greatly by district. We've seen some districts go back to in-person learning with kind of the way it was before. We've seen some districts, as you mentioned earlier, coming in slowly with lower grades. We've seen some districts coming in with a hybrid model. And it's important to remember that we have about 56, 57 school districts in Maricopa County. And so what you really want to do is you want to go to your local school district's website. They all have very prominently right now posted information around COVID-19 and what they're doing to mitigate just the effects of it in a school setting. And they're going to have information also on there about upcoming school board conversations. So a great way to find out more about what your local district is doing and those decisions being made is they're actually being made in real time. By our local school boards. We had a board meeting in Scottsdale last night. We had about a week and a half ago, the Cave Creek Unified School District. And so, this is your opportunity as a community member to submit a letter, to have your voice be heard, and to have some input with the local governing board and the superintendent who are really making these decisions moving forward. And I do know that just everything that the districts are doing, they're doing moving forward with safety in mind. I know some districts are moving at different speeds, and that might be frustrating to certain people depending on what district you live in. But that is all the more reason to get involved and to share your voice. But understand that people are moving at a little bit different speed based on the things that they're hearing in the community. And this is these are community schools. These are schools that reflect the people who live in those communities and to send their kids there. And that's pretty great that we live in a world where we can have that input and reach out to our governing board members or our superintendent.
Yeah, I did actually hear from one parent in the Cave Creek district who, was frustrated over some of the staff there calling out sick and effectively closing Cactus Shadows High School. But he did say that one of the positive things that he felt that had come out of all of this was that parents were more engaged with what their school boards were doing, and that the community was just more engaged as a whole and realizing everything that schools do offer to our communities beyond those academics. Carla, I think you mentioned that you spoke with some moms who actually kind of split up their school board meetings and then report back to each other like that or something like that.
Nowadays, with school board meetings running so long because they're, the board members are obviously looking through every single aspect of reopening a school, right? It's not an easy task by any means. And so there's a group of moms out here in the East Valley that are taking part in kind of divvying up the school board meeting so that one mom listens to 1 hour, kind of sums it up and then passes it along to the rest of the group. And then another mom picks up the next hour. I know that Chandler Unified's last school board meeting was about 4 hours. I think it went past 11 o'clock at night. So that's one way of like, hey, I don't necessarily have to sit there the entire 4 hours. I can listen to one part, kind of get the cliff notes on it, and then pass the buck along to another parent. So it really takes a village. It takes a village approach to all of this. Dr. Melmed, one other question that I have for you with the mental health, and it was brought up earlier, school is not just academics. School is social emotional. School is learning how to get along. School is learning how to share, how to defend yourself in the playground, how to speak up for yourself. So those are the skills that you and I were talking about the other day. How important is all of that when we allow our kids to come back to an actual school?
The American Academy of Pediatrics strongly supports children going back to school. We fully recognize, the pediatricians of the country, the importance of in-school attendance, especially for those who live in poverty, those with disabilities, and our minorities. To get down to the very basics often, it provides a safe haven for so many of our children. Reliable nutrition is provided in so many school districts, which children might not otherwise be getting. Opportunities to engage in healthy physical activities. So there are certain basic parameters which have to be exercised within the school that it's extremely difficult to do when children are at home. Now, of course, and we've all mentioned it, it's safety first. Without any question, we have to follow the guidelines that are set forth by the school district, as the superintendent had mentioned. After that, there's the social emotional skills that children learn, the interaction, the cooperative learning, the joint attention, the capacity to adapt your perspective to somebody else's, to have shared insights into different issues, especially now in our country, which often seems so torn apart. It's such an important activity to do when children come together, cooperatively learn, accept other people's perspectives, and are able to move forward with skills that are going to be useful for them for the rest of their lives. That takes place with peer learning on the playground, in the classroom. Now, certainly academics are important as well. I constantly get asked the question, my child's going to slip behind, what's going to happen? They're going to fall behind in math and reading. The concerns about academics pale in comparison to the emotional welfare of our children. How are they going to actually manage them, manage their stresses and manage their anxiety? The children will catch up. The academics will come. The good readers will remain good readers and will keep going in that direction. And those with expertise in math will have similar improvements over time. But these times that we're experiencing right now are the times when our children are going to look back in 20 and 30 and 40 years' time, and they're going to feel the social and the emotional concerns that they had at this time. And they're going to look at the teachers, and they're going to look at us parents and say, how did our parents manage? How did they do during the time of COVID? And they're going to hopefully look back with pride and say, our teachers, our schools, our parents, boy, under such challenging situations which change day to day, they remained firm, granite, like rock. They were there for us, they supported us, they recognized our needs, and they allowed us to flourish. And they're going to give thanks to this generation of teachers and parents.
Yes, definitely. Definitely those teachers are heroes, right? Whether you're teaching online or whether that teacher is in person or it's a hybrid model. I drove past my local elementary school this morning, and it was very early this morning, very early. And I saw one of our teachers there, working away so early. She said, I just have to get the day going. And I said, I'm just giving you my very best because you're doing the very best that you can. And every teacher who I've talked to has said to me, we want to be back in the classroom with the kids. That's where that's where our heart is. That's where kids want to be. That's where we want them to be, but we want to do it safely. And that's, I think, Stephen, if you could mention and talk about that safety, that is where it varies, right, from district to district. We don't know exactly. One district may be doing one way, and then another district may be doing a completely different setup. So what are the thresholds that you would say are important as a parent to say, these are the top things that I should keep in mind if I do decide to send my child back into the classroom?
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to our teachers. They are working harder than they've ever worked before. They have been trained to teach a certain way, and on a dime, we said, "Hey, can you now take everything you've learned and now do that via a virtual classroom?" And teachers are lifelong learners. They are up to the task, and they are working harder than they've ever worked before. But going to this idea of different districts going back in a different way, Maricopa County is a really big place. It's bigger than physically, it's bigger than the state of Connecticut. If Maricopa County was a state by population, we'd be about the 26th largest state. And so I think it's natural that within the county we have different communities. We have COVID-19 doing different things in different communities and different neighborhoods. And so districts need to respond a different way. And then our teachers, I think, going back to your comment about they're ready to come back, they do want to come back. And Danielle, you and I were speaking the other day, and that teachers, aren't this monolithic group. We have some who are ready to just go back yesterday as if nothing changed. We have some who are ready to go back in a safe, socially distanced, sanitary way to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And then we have some who maybe they have health concerns. We have some who maybe they care for a family member who has health concerns. And so they're a little bit more nervous going back. And I know our districts are trying to take and this is what's so hard for our local districts. They're trying to take all these things into account. They're trying to balance, kind of marry the families of children who are ready to go back in person with those teachers who are ready to go back in person, and marry those families who maybe who in their own family has a grandparent living with them that they're trying to care for, and they're not ready to go back in person quite yet, and marry those families and those kids with those teachers who are in a similar position. And so, that is what is really making this very challenging as a school leader to go back is just solving some of these problems. But I agree. On the whole, teachers, I was a classroom teacher for 15 years. And when you step into a room with 30 kids or 25 kids, or sometimes you get 40 and that's okay. You just feed off those kids and that energy. And that's a little bit harder to do virtually. And our teachers are doing the best they can at doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's been, I think, one of the big challenges and one of the big concerns too from a lot of parents out there is, making sure that their children are getting the best possible instruction that they can, even in that virtual format, which is certainly not easy for our educators to transition to, but they're doing it, and we so appreciate that. Dr. Melmet, I was curious with your work with SARC. We hear from parents of children with special needs quite a bit, and particularly their concerns about remote instruction versus in-person instruction, and some of the unique challenges that come along with remote instruction for students who have special needs. With SARC, I know you guys provide so many services to families in our communities. How have you guys had to kind of adapt some of your programming or alter some of your programming to continue to serve those communities during this time?
Well, both at SARC as well as at the Melmet Center, we're definitely dealing with the most vulnerable groups in our population. We believe that we provide essential medical services, that the services we provide to children with autism, for example, within the homes, are essential for their medical well-being. So, but at the same time, we fully recognize the importance of providing these services in the safest possible way. That's very difficult. We're expecting our staff, both at SARC as well as at the Melmet Center, to go into homes to address the needs of children who have extremely difficult developmental challenges and in a one-on-one situation to help facilitate the most optimal outcome for those children. As you can understand, and you probably can see, the logistics of doing something like that when you're very close to some of these children, despite wearing masks and face shields, some of the children have difficulties with controlling their overall bodies. They might have problems with salivation. They might have spitting problems. And we still, nonetheless, at the same time, have to engage them. So that's the challenge. The bigger challenge, of course, is that so many of our older children, our adolescents, who have severe developmental challenges, no longer have a place to go. Those places have often been closed. So what happens to those children? They have to stay at home. Their parents, who have to work remotely, have to take care of them as well. They often can't find anyone else to participate in any which way. The children, the adolescents, and even the young adults can be extraordinarily challenging behaviorally, aggressive, sometimes even violent. The pressures within those families are just enormous. And if there ever was a group of parents who can't wait until public schools reopen and are able to take their children back in, it's that particular group. The other concern is, of course, that so many of these children require socialization. And if we're just going to close the doors on them, not have them interact with anyone excepting maybe a screen, we're defeating the whole mission and purpose of our intervention, which is to enhance social communication. So it's a real challenge being able to do both things at the same time, being able to socially distance, maintain good sanitary situations, while at the same time providing one-on-one treatments.
You know, Dr.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I interviewed a teacher in a classroom with mainly children who are developmentally delayed. So they're kids with, either ADHD, autism, maybe some speech delay. Kudos to that teacher there, because she did mention, this classroom setting is where this is the most vulnerable population, as far as these kids more than anybody. And they all need social skills, but this particular group is the most beneficial from that one-on-one connection. The positive to all of that, I thought, was the ones that are going to school, because there is no way they can get that socialization through a screen. They're getting really one-on-one time with that teacher, a 1-to-3 ratio, as opposed to what they normally get in a public school setting, which is maybe 1-to-10. So just a little bit of a cup is half full, I guess, scenario, right, for those teachers that are helping the developmentally delayed. I will tell you, and I've told this to Dr. Melmed, and I've told this to you, Danielle, I have a son who is developmentally delayed. And so I specifically know what that entails and how that social component was so key in those younger years for him to be where he's at today, now that he's in 7th grade. Natalie Champagne, she commented at about 12:20 today, and I loved what she said, because I think that resonates with a lot of what this town hall and a lot of what Danielle and I have been working on, which is, if you're comfortable sending your children back right now, then so be it. And if you're not, then keep them home. But everyone needs to do what's right for their specific family, right? I don't know what my neighbor's family is going through, and my neighbor may not know what I'm going through as the Navarrete family. So it is important to respect everybody else around you for whatever it is that they chose or are choosing to do these next couple of months, as the transition from the online to the in-person learning starts taking place throughout our entire valley. And Steve, with that Maricopa County, I had no idea we were so big. I knew we were big, but boy, you really put it into context for me. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We're big.
It's absolutely. And of course, the concern is when the children are at home, and we've had different situations. A child might be at home, a therapist might be going into the home and treat the child, and then the mother of the child comes back with a positive test, and the father of the child has a positive test, and the child themselves has a positive test, and the therapist has a positive test. So, there's always that kind of balance, because we certainly, having PPE and wearing masks and everything else like that is absolutely not ideal. But once you put your toe in the water and start to open up without handrails and without guidelines and without safety parameters, we open ourselves up to a quick close down of all that situation. So that particular family that I just told you about from 2 weeks ago, mother, father, and child having had positive tests, they were immediately removed from any possibility of treatment. That's why it's so important to just keep that in mind, safety first.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Steve, you and I addressed this during our Asked and Answered session recently. One of the biggest questions that we get, that I'm sure you hear, is what happens if someone on a campus gets COVID-19? And your response was very honest of, it depends, right? Can you explain that a little bit more for those who are following along here?
It does depend. There are a lot of factors that go in, and basically what is going to be a commonality among every positive case is reaching out to the Maricopa County Department of Public Health to get them involved, to be able to, whether it's contact trace, to identify, who else may have been exposed. And the reason why it's important to take every situation a little differently is we've got to figure out, did that kid who tested positive, did they get COVID at home and then bring it to school? Or did they get it at school and are they then spreading it somewhere else? So our response to those two different situations are very, very different. Because, if we can contact trace a student and that student brings COVID-19 to school, and we can identify, the 15 kids that person interacted with during the school day, and maybe the 2 adults, that makes trying to contain that much easier. But if we identify that student contracted COVID-19 from another student on campus somewhere, well, that makes the challenge of then contact tracing and just doing the investigative work. Our county public health are more like private investigators right now, just trying to track everything down and making sure we can identify where the community spread is. And so it's very different. And that's why people just need to be patient when it comes to identifying how to respond to COVID-19. And then the goal of schools is really to kind of keep people and students in bubbles, to limit their interaction with their local peers in their classroom and their immediate teachers, so that identifying, contact tracing in the case of a positive test is that much easier.
Yeah, I know when we were at Eastmark High School in Queen Creek, and I've heard this from a couple other districts as well, that one thing that they instituted is seating charts. So students come in, they sit in the same place every day. If, for some reason there was a case in that classroom, it would be easier to know, what students were in there at what time. They go to the cafeteria at the same time. Just like you mentioned, those bubbles of trying to have a good idea of who's around who and when. So, I some parents actually were commenting about seating charts and kind of why, if that was going to be used for contact tracing. And I said, yeah, I mean, the principal said that's one way that they can keep better track of where kids are at what time. But, Carla, like we've talked about, I mean, again, it really depends on what district you're in, what mitigation measures are being taken. Susan Kepling here at about 12:23, so about 5 minutes ago, said, how much socializing will there be when they're 6 feet apart? And Dr. Melman, this is a question that I have for you. Something that we hear from parents sometimes is, the schools that existed before March, those are not the same schools that kids will be going back to, right? We have so many different mitigation measures in place in most districts, I would say, most public K through 12 districts. Are there any concerns as to how that could impact a child's social, emotional wellness of, being in a school where people are wearing masks, where you're kept apart, where there are dividers, especially for those kiddos who are maybe kindergarten or starting high school for the first time? Are there concerns in the social, emotional realm regarding that?
The children that I've seen in my practice who've gone back to school, Their parents tell me, and the reports are from the teachers as well, that the kids have adapted to that. The children are going to school, they're wearing their masks, they're staying their 6 foot distance. Obviously, there's nothing magical about the 6 foot, but on the other hand, it's a figure that's come up with through the public health authorities to try and contain what could be obviously a devastating kind of situation. And the same is true for all the PPE. So the question is, when do you stop and when do you start? And would never like excellent to be the enemy of good. If we're trying good enough to keep 6 feet apart and keep our distance, and actually for those of you who've measured 6 feet, it's not terribly far apart at all. It's certainly not, that 6 feet doesn't happen in a one-on-one situation with a therapist and a child with autism. It's more like 6 inches often, unfortunately. But the 6 foot is a good place to start. A lot of people are concerned that that should be much greater than that. But once again, let not excellent be the enemy of good. We're trying to contain this virus as much as we can, and hopefully without stepping on anybody's toes and without stepping on anybody's civil rights, because civil rights, of course, must always be maintained. But in this condition, I always think more of civic responsibilities more than anything, because the children wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart from their teachers is protecting the teacher. Not protecting the child, of course, it's protecting the teacher. And the most important person, of course, in any kind of school is the teacher. We want our teachers to feel confident that we're doing everything in our power to make them safe as well as to keep them healthy. And that way, it'll be a much shorter time before we'll be able to be back in school together with children.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it, right? It's about the teacher, because she's that one person that comes in every single day, no matter what. And there's 24, 25 little bodies depending on her for that teaching. And Steve, if you can relate a little bit about what are you hearing from teachers? And you said you are a former educator yourself, still are in a different extent. What are they telling you? I mean, I know that they don't come all cut up in one same shape or form, and they're all so different. And then if you can talk a little bit about, maybe are you hearing that some of them are leaving the classroom, and we've already been dealing with the teacher shortage over the last couple of years. How is COVID affecting our teacher situation here in Arizona? What can you tell us?
Yeah. One conversation I just had with a friend of mine, we taught together. He's still teaching. He has diabetes, high blood pressure. He's in a higher kind of at-risk category. He teaches high school. He teaches older kids, and we have some data that shows that maybe older kids have a different COVID situation than some of the youngest kids. And I said, hey, what would it take for you to go back to the classroom? And he said, what would be important for me is for my students to be in masks, and it would be important for me to have some sort of cleaning regime in between students coming and going in between the classes. And then I said, what about smaller class sizes because of an AB schedule or a hybrid schedule? And he said, that would just be icing on the cake. And he said, in a situation like that, I would be ready to go back tomorrow. And so this is a career teacher. He would rather be in the classroom. He teaches a course where it's hands-on. Kids are taking things apart and building things. And he said, it's just really challenging to do online. We're making the best of it, but I'll be better in the classroom. And so, he's a good example of, I think teachers want to go back. I think, a lot of the question has been for many districts, should we go back? And I think that's kind of the wrong question to ask. It should be, how do we go back as safely as we possibly can? And I have heard of some teachers who have said, hey, if I have to go back in person because of my own personal health and the health of my family, I'm probably going to leave the profession for a little while. And that's completely understandable. And, you mentioned the teacher shortage that we had before COVID-19. I think that just, puts the onus on us as education leaders to try to figure out how to do more, how to maybe build our teaching force. In the beginning, our governor has supported the Teachers Academy to try to get more teachers into the profession. I think we as teachers and as the entire education profession, we need to be um, we need to maybe be a little bit better ambassadors of our own profession. It's easy to focus on some of the challenging and negative situations that go on, and we have it. I'm not going to gloss that over, but sometimes maybe we need to talk about just all the wonderful things that we experience as teachers and encourage more people to come into the profession and talk about all those really great things. And so there are a lot of things we can do. Education funding is always a hot topic in Arizona. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon, but there are other things that we can do. In my office, we've actually done a lot of teacher surveys and collected a lot of data. And teachers have said, salary is on there, but that's just maybe one of 5 or 6 things. It's about, the respect as a teacher. It's about giving me more time as a teacher to prepare for my classroom, to improve my my environment, my work environment. And so there are things that we can do to bring more teachers in and to keep teachers from leaving. But absolutely, I have had some individuals say we're ready to go back, and then some who, hey, if I go back in person, I'm probably going to move on. And I think for the most part, districts have been trying to work with our teachers through this. And then I guess one last thing I'd say on this, I think the districts that are maybe a step ahead of all the other districts are those who have been involving teachers in the reopening process throughout the entire time of COVID-19. So teachers who have had input, who have said, hey, these are the things that I'm looking for, that I would feel comfortable doing if we go back. And so those districts have teachers who are much more on board with going back in person sooner than later, because they have expectations set. They said, this is what we want, and our districts are trying to provide that. And some of the districts who I think are having some of that, maybe a little bit of conflict, are those who maybe haven't had the teachers involved in those conversations leading up to going back.
Yeah, sure. And just going off of that whole idea of teacher retention and teacher shortage, just a quick note, the Arizona School Personnel Administration Association, every year they do their survey and release some data as to where we are as far as teacher retention and teacher shortage. And so we are expecting a report from them next week sometime. And so that's something that we're watching for. That'll give us kind of our first indication of how this pandemic is affecting our situation regarding our educators here. So that is something to definitely keep an eye out for. Also, something else that Steve, that your office also does is you guys are the point for folks who want to homeschool their children. And, we've talked a lot about parents having a choice in I would say all the districts I've seen have given their parents, an online option, an in-person option, but some parents are choosing other options, whether that's microschooling or homeschooling. You guys have seen a pretty big increase in your homeschooling affidavits, correct?
We have seen a huge increase in our homeschool families coming to file. And how that works, if you want to homeschool your child, you come to my office, you fill out an affidavit saying I'm going to take responsibility for the education of my child, and you have to have some physical proof that you are the legal guardian of these kids. And we've seen a huge influx. Our homeschool department, it's hard to book a time to come in right now because they are working overtime. And most of the conversations we've been having with these homeschool families, most of these families have been thinking about doing this for a while. They have friends who homeschool, or they've thought about it for a long time, and they just kind of needed that little push to get over the edge. And they said, hey, the time is right. This is what I want to do for my kids. I've thought about it for a long time. And there's no time like the present, especially in a situation like this. And in a situation where maybe I'm going to be actively involved with my kids every day anyway, why not just take that extra step and be that homeschool parent? And so that's more the homeschool parent that we've been seeing that's maybe a little bit different than some homeschool parents that we've had before. These have been kind of on the edge people. And so far, just the response has been super positive. We actually work in tandem with a group called Arizona Families for Homeschool Education. They have a great website and have great resources for homeschool families. And so if you're thinking about doing that, there are a lot of resources out there, so you don't have to kind of make it up on your own as you go. And homeschool in the year 2020 there's so many more resources and so many more supports. It looks very different than maybe when some of us were growing up in the 80s and having our homeschool friends and considering homeschooling. And so it's very different and tons of resources available.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. There's one other question that I want to get in there for Dr. Melmed before we take off here. We're getting close to the end of the show, this town hall, and that is from Karen Rambet. She posted at 12:37. She talked about good nutrition and strengthening the immune system. And I know that for the kids on the spectrum, their immune system is so important. But in general, I know that recently the CDC put out a study about the kids who have gotten COVID and who have been hospitalized tend to be children who are obese. And so with obesity and with the immune system and COVID, Dr. Melmed, what can you share with us if there's one bit of information that as parents we should take from you as far as our kids' health, nutrition-wise, what would you say it is?
Well, I think the most important thing is that, as I alluded to earlier, that we maintain rhythm for our children. And it impacts many different issues. It impacts our immune system. It impacts our capacity to manage stress and to handle situations such as that. If we want to improve our immune system, one of the most important things we can do is practice good sleep hygiene, making sure that our kids are sleeping adequately through the night. A good night's sleep results not only improved social, emotional, and attentional behaviors the next day, but it also builds our immune system. Now, children who are in poverty and have poor nutrition and who are obese are definitely at a much higher risk. And we've seen in numerous different children's hospitals across the country that the children being hospitalized, especially those who do poorly, are definitely those who have challenges with high levels of obesity and almost metabolic type syndromes in the young children. So feeding our children healthy, nutritious food every single morning clearly is important. Now, there are certain foods which are going to be something which we shouldn't encourage, things which I call excitotoxins, no excessive sugar, no excessive color, no excessive caffeine, no MSG at all. All of those kinds of things make sense for a child. But the most important thing above all is to have the child eat breakfast. And I don't mean eating donuts and sugary cereals, but to eat complex carbohydrates, to have a good amount of protein. 4 ounces of protein in the morning should be almost mandatory for every single child. It goes a long way to enhancing the immune system and improving behaviors right throughout the day. And that can be, of course, beans, it can be eggs, it can be fish, it can be meat, often foods which require extra preparation, extra time, not something on the fly, stopping it and at a Circle K on the way to work and buying a child a Twinkie or something like that. That's obviously not what we're talking about. But having a regular breakfast time, hopefully, which isn't terribly rushed, hopefully where mom and dad, if there is lucky enough to be mom and daddy and any other significant other as well, present and sitting down and eating that breakfast will go a long way. Now, there are different supplements and different issues related to enhancement of the immune system. I don't want to get into that right now, but we know that our children with autism especially are exceptionally picky eaters. They don't like to try new foods, but all that starts very early on, and it's something we focus on from the get-go, making sure that children are presented with balanced meals 3 times a day. And the most important thing as well about meal times is to make sure that there's no screen happening, that there's nobody on their phone, not mother, not father, not child, not significant other, that the screens are turned off, and it's time to truly appreciate each other. That is what good food, good family food is all about. So yes, I would be a strongest supporter for that. Maintaining routines is clearly essential.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good family food. I like that. I hadn't thought of that, but that
Good
quality
family food.
time, right, that we're spending with our kids. We're not each on our phones, but instead we're actually connecting with each other. Steve, I know you have children who are in school, so you can relate with what Dr. Melman just said. Thank you all so much for being with us. I think we're kind of running out of time here. Danielle and I could probably go on for hours. And so thank you all. Thank you. We hope we've provided our viewership with a lot of good resources and a lot of good information, a lot of good reminders for us all about what to do during this time. We don't have all the answers in front of us, but we can definitely have our best foot forward, right? And our best intentions, and making those intentions with a lot of information from Steve, from Dr. Melmed. Thank you both for your time. Danielle, is there anything else that we want to add right before we leave our audience?
I don't think so. It's amazing how fast this time goes. So I just want to thank you both so much again for the great information, the great insight. Those of you who may have joined in the middle, you can find this town hall at abc15.com/town hall. And then also we are continuing to track what's going on in the districts, and we are updating it constantly on abc15.com/schools. So make sure that you are referring to those two websites as well to stay up to date on everything that's happening in education right now. So thank you so much again, and have a great Thursday.